not just going to stick to sports. If you stick to that mantra, then everybody should stick to what they're doing, right? That means nobody's allowed to have a political opinion. It just so happens we get these microphones stuck in our face and we have a bigger platform. But it's free speech. And if you look at the history of the world, the biggest problems come when people don't speak. A lot of us feel strongly about our need to speak out on justice, and I think it's important. Max?
Yeah.
Is Steve Kerr right?
Of course he's right. And I'm broadly sympathetic to those who, even when they watch this show, say, look, I watch sports to escape this kind of stuff, the real world. I want distraction. I get that. The old saying is a sports show should be like a bar. You know, you don't go in and talk religion or politics because it can be divisive. I am sympathetic to that. But these are strange and dangerous times. And it's more important than ever that citizens get informed and follow their consciences. And if you look at the history of sports, Hank Greenberg, Detroit superstar, Detroit Tigers slugging superstar, enlists publicly in the Army after Pearl Harbor. You could say, well, that's patriotic. Sure, but political activism and awareness is patriotic. Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jim Brown joined, others to support Muhammad Ali at a time where his political awareness and activism was very important in the civil rights movement and beyond. This is nothing new in our sporting landscape. And so I applaud Steve Kerr for this. He's absolutely right. Get informed, follow your conscience. He's leading by example, particularly in a world and in a culture, American culture, what we export more than anything is our culture around the world still. And particularly in America, our sports culture, the figures there are disproportionately famous and influential. And if they are so moved, especially nowadays, they should use it. I applaud Steve Kerr, Greg Popovich, and others.
Well, first of all, I agree with you, and I appreciate your latter points about what our culture is all about and what we export, because that's absolutely true. Steve Kerr's a good man. Steve Kerr is not just an outstanding coach. He's not just a champion as a player, but he's somebody, regardless of the fact that I didn't believe that Mark Jackson should have ever lost his job. I certainly have no problem with Steve Kerr being the one that benefited from it, because he deserves it. And he's done an outstanding job and has established himself as one of the premier coaches in basketball, and he deserves credit. But also he deserves credit because he's a genuinely decent man, a decent human being who's not a fake. He isn't somebody that's just speaking about it because he's trying to join the chorus or anything like that. He's always been an intellectual to some degree. He's always been conscientious. We all know him to be that, and we also know the story about how his dad, who was an ambassador, ultimately was murdered by terrorists. So we know his story, and obviously it hits him in ways that it doesn't hit most of us, because it directly affected him for the rest of his life. Just to walk around on a day-to-day basis, no matter how wonderful your life is, knowing that on Father's Day, for example, or any other day of the year, you don't have your father around because a terrorist murdered him, is something that's incredibly profound. So I take his words very, very serious. I have no problem with what he said. He's absolutely right, and we should applaud his position. The only thing that I would say, however, is that while we're sitting here and doing that as it pertains to Steve Kerr, I'll piggyback off of what you ultimately ended the conversation with on your part, Max, and that is this. If you're going to speak about something, have the decency to attempt to educate yourself on the issues, rather than just trying to wax poetically about something you don't know anything about at all. Don't do that, because now you veered the conversation in a different direction and then positioned yourself where you can get attacked. And let me take myself, for example, Max. One of the things that people don't appreciate about me, particularly in the African-American community, I get a lot of love, don't get me wrong, and my brothers and sisters love me, and I love them back. But one of the things that goes widely unrecognized about me is that even though I speak on an abundance of issues, I don't pretend to know everything. I know what I don't know, and I'm willing to acknowledge it. But what I will do is touch on it to be a provocateur of thought, so somebody else can take off that softball that I lobbed up in the air and knock it out the park with their level of intelligence, their information, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes it takes somebody being in the forefront willing to give a spark plug to the conversation so dialogue can disseminate to the masses and other more informed and intelligent voices can take it to another level. You're not always the finished product just because you're touching on something. Sometimes we might touch on things intimately and with depth. And then other times, we might touch on it on a surface level just to engage folks in conversation so they can take it to another level, thereby forcing us all to have a conversation that needs to be had. And I think that's the kind of thing that Steve Kerr is alluding to. I applaud him for it. I happen to talk to owner Joe Lacob on occasion for the Golden State Warriors whenever I see him. Bob Myers, the general manager. Golden State Warriors are a first-class organization. They don't all think alike. They have very different beliefs, but they come together for a common goal, and they respect each other's point of view. And that dialogue is what makes them a first-class organization, because they're able to take all things into account, and that makes them that much more formidable because they think about everything. And it ain't just on the court. It's beyond. And that's why Steve Kerr should be commended for this, because he's an extension of a culture that we should all be proud of that's taking place in the Golden State.
And my point that you talked about citizens being informed is important. We both supported Colin Kaepernick months ago until he said there was no difference in candidates. He's not going to vote. And he showed up with a Castro T-shirt, and that's when you say time out. Got to be better informed than that. And if you think you are informed and those are the conclusions you reach, those conclusions will be criticized. And the fact that when Steve Kerr and Greg Popovich, for that matter, because he immediately jumps to mind, when they speak about these things, they appear to be informed and have reached rational conclusions. Not that I agree with them, but that they are well-informed conclusions is important. Particularly nowadays, ignorance is not an excuse. People need to get informed. Yep,
and that's the key, especially if you're going to use your platform, Max, to be informed, because otherwise you could do a lot more harm than good if you aren't. When we come back, could Deshaun Jackson be headed back to Philly? What? He isn't exactly ruling this out. Is this surprising since he had such a bad breakup with the Eagles a few years ago? Stephen A. knows a little bit about that city. We'll discuss. And is it time for Jimmy G to take the ball for real? He says he wants to be a starter, so should he beg the Patriots to trade him? We'll dive into that when we return.
Honey Nut Cheerios get their delicious taste from honest ingredients, like real delicious honey and real oats. Okay, that's still honey.
And somebody is hype on a Wednesday. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being with us here on First Take. Max, always good to have you back here in Bristol with me. Stephen A. Smiling. How we doing?
What's up, y'all? What's up? Hey, Max. Hey,
Yo.
Max. How's Bristol?
It's just fine here.
I mean, it's a little chilly out here in L.A. I think it's, you know, the sun is coming up. It's 3 hours behind you. It's a little chilly out here in L.A. It's about 6 to 7 degrees.
It's lovely in Connecticut this time of year, as anyone can tell you.
You know, I'm just saying. I just thought I'd let you know that. You know, I'm telling y'all right now. I'm about to move out here. I'm getting me a crib out here. I'm tired of this. It's beautiful. It's been a beautiful day, beautiful city. Hey, Molly, you used to work in L.A. too. Hey, yeah. you are right in Bristol. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, you know, I used to live there until you had me do this show.
I lived there about 4 years, and then I came out for this job called First Take. Yeah,
oh, really?
In Bristol,
really?
Yeah. Yes, it was a great opportunity.
Listen, it's a great opportunity. I do understand that. I'm certainly sensitive to that, but at the same time, y'all are there. I'm in Hollywood. It seems appropriate. It seems appropriate.
So fitting. Well, Stephen A., you asked and you received. The Lake Show is now the Magic Show. So Lakers president Jeannie Buss finally pulling the trigger, naming Magic Johnson their new president of basketball operations while firing both longtime GM Mitch Kupchak, who was with the team for 30 years, and her brother, executive vice president of basketball operations Jim Buss. So at 19-39, the Lakers have the NBA's third worst record. They're coming off a franchise worst 17-65 season and have missed the playoffs for 3 straight seasons, the longest postseason drought in franchise history. Clearly not the Lakers basketball that we had come accustomed to. Stephen A., can Magic save the Lakers?
Well, first of all, he already has. he already has, because he brings instant credibility to one of the most storied franchises in the history of sports. Just by mere virtue of the fact that Magic Johnson is now calling the shots as president of basketball operations, and it is no longer Jim Buss, a model of ineptitude, a model of inefficiency, a model of incompetence, all because of his emotions and then some. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that Jim Buss is running basketball operations. Jeannie Buss is the governor for the Los Angeles Lakers, meeting with the Board of Governor meetings. She is the one that represents the franchise. She is ultimately the boss. They are brother and sister running the Lakers organization and have not even spoken since November 1st. I mean, that's how pathetic this situation has been. It is how dysfunctional it has been. And look at the record since Dr. Jerry Buss, God rest his wonderful soul, passed away in February of 2013. What is their record? They're 27-55. They're 21-61. They're 17-65. And now they've got the third worst record in the NBA in 19-39. Now, primarily, we understand that Kobe Bryant was hurt. And if Kobe Bryant were not hurt, they certainly would not have been that awful. We do understand and recognize that. But the level of ineptitude exercised by Jim Buss, the dysfunctionality that sifted through this franchise like a virus, the combination of Jim Buss and Jeannie Buss turning off prospective free agents like LaMarcus Aldridge walking out on a meeting, like Kevin Durant even refusing to take a phone call from the franchise. The list goes on and on. They have been a model of incompetence. They have been a laughingstock. They have been embarrassing in every way imaginable. So the mere presence alone of Magic Johnson says to Laker Nation, we are taking this seriously. It's no longer a family affair. We're not going to sit up there and sacrifice the credibility of this franchise and Laker Nation because of sibling love for one another or our love for our father. Therefore, we have to try to get along. We're going to shove all of that aside, and we're going to put the interest of Laker Nation first. The hiring of Magic Johnson instantly establishes that. Still got to do the job. Spoke to Bill Plaschke, the voice of the Los Angeles yesterday, Max Kellerman. He's cautiously optimistic as to the job that Magic Johnson is going to do. And we recognize Magic Johnson still has to do the job. We get that. But at least we know somebody is going to be in position, literally attempting to do the job, as opposed to stabbing and taking jabs at a sister or a brother or putting family rivalries ahead of the interest of Laker Nation. It's instant credibility. Once again, we can look at the purple and gold with pride. We can understand we have a license to expect something other than ineptitude, and we are moving forward. You are there. I am here. It is Los Angeles. It is Lala. It is Irvin Magic Johnson, reestablishing that basketball will be the primary focus of this basketball organization, and not two siblings butting heads like immature little brats at one another. That's what happened yesterday.
Can Magic turn it around? Can he bring the Lakers back to championship contention?
I think so, eventually.
The answer is yes, but he's got to be willing to do what he has to do, and what he has to do is tank right now. Is Magic willing to do that? Look, just because you're great at one thing, in Magic's case playing basketball, doesn't mean that those skills translate to the front office. Now, Phil Jackson just hasn't put in the effort, but he was arguably the greatest coach of all time. And he's arguably the worst executive of all time, right? Magic will put in the effort. He said on this show, and there's no reason to not believe him, that that his other businesses are up and running. He'll leave other people in charge of those, and he will focus, he said, 150% on the Lakers. And if he does that, he'll be ahead of Phil Jackson. But is he willing to do what the Lakers need him to do? Tank, not stank. Stank, which means tanking by stinking, not on purpose.